Getting into the NFL is hard. Doing it both as a player and as a scout, now that is something even harder. Today's guest, Michael Coe, not only did both, but won a Super Bowl along the way. From the field to the Senior Bowl and eventually the Northeast, Michael talks transition, Bryce, and the grind of the road today on Scouting the League. Hey everyone, and welcome to Scouting the League. Excited to get Michael Coe on and start digging into his time with the Panthers. But first, make sure you head over, like, subscribe, and share this podcast and video wherever you are listening and watching. If it is our new home on Fans First Sports Network, on Megaphone, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube, make sure you share it with a friend as well as let us know what you think. As always, Neil Stratton of Inside the League here as my co-host. Neil is at Inside the League on Twitter. His website is InsideTheLeague.com. Make sure you are signed up for that Friday wrap to get the best information from the week in the world of football. I am Roderick David at Right Step ADV is where you can find me as always. If you want to find me, if not, just leave me alone and go harass Neil with all those football questions. And today's guest, Michael Coe, a Memphis, Tennessee native that was not a slow, stiff defensive back like me. No, he could actually play, and that led him to Arkansas, where he was playing for the Razorbacks before he graduated, headed on over to Alabama State for his final season. He was eventually drafted in the 5th round by the Indianapolis Colts, then spent parts of the next 6 years in the NFL with the Colts, the Giants on 2 different stints, the Jaguars, Dolphins, and Cowboys, before going north of the border and spending 1 season with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, a 2012 Super Bowl champion, I might add. He then had several titles across the sports and business world before jumping on with the Senior Bowl. He eventually then became an area scout for those Carolina Panthers. And as we know and have discussed, with new GMs come changes at times, regardless of that job performance. And in the May of 2024, Michael was again a free agent, but their loss is our gain. Awesome. Well, Michael, the plan was to have you on about 2 weeks ago, but between Helen and Milton, we have had to wait. Thankfully, it sounds like you and yours made it through with minimal issues. So finally, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Neil Rogers, awesome, man. I'm glad we finally got a chance to link up. Yeah, man, guys, great. We've had minimal damage, low water that came through up underneath our foundation. So we're just still working through that. A couple other homes in the neighborhood are going through that as well. So going through the insurance, you know how it goes, and we're just working diligently through that. And I know there's been a lot of other people have been, far more affected than we have. So we just feel blessed and appreciative. And I know there's a lot of other resources that guys are connected with. Actually, the NFL has sent out for some. There's a lot of former players down in this area, so a lot of players' homes been affected by this. So just keep everybody lifted.
Yeah. Yep. No question. Well, it was nice to get you on, and again, minimal damage. Again, we can all deal with a little bit of damage. So let's talk origin story. Again, going from a player to scouting, getting the Senior Bowl in there. Talk us through again your origin story. Take us through a little bit more detail and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, man, long story. I'll try to make it short. I came from a big family, southern kind of Midwestern family, if you will, and football family. My dad's a coach, so I got introduced to the sport very early at a early age. Of 1 or 6, I do have 2 older brothers, so that obviously helps. I was the little feisty kid, probably at the Napoleon complex, right? I was always trying to thought I was a little runt for a while, but yeah, man. So traveling, gaining that experience with my father, going into the facility sometime, and they had the little stencils. I used to do that for my dad, the formation stencil. I do that and do some charting for him. So I used to love doing that. And he'd be in his meetings, and I'd go down and chart all his stuff, man. I just go crank it out. So that's that's where the affinity for the game started. And my parents were great. They never forced football or sports on us. You know, they was like, you're going to do something and you're never going to quit. So they let it be our choice. So I'm so thankful for that because I've got a deeper love for this game through that. So, yeah, like you said, long story short, multiple sports. You know, out of high school, all state track football, kind of the same old things everybody else. Went to Arkansas there, actually as a receiver, transitioned to corner, play a little both ways, actually, punt return there. And then, yeah, I graduated actually early. And then my senior year, I went down to play for my father, which was, man, it was awesome. And now that I'm being a dad, it was even more awesome. I appreciate it more now than I did at that time. Right, I was so focused on having a great senior year, maybe get an opportunity to play in the NFL level. So super fired up about that. And then yeah, man, got drafted, got to play in both All Star games, the East West and Senior Bowl, and you know, off and running, and had a 6-year career in the NFL. Then played in Canada for a year there. Um, Obviously won the Super Bowl. Is great. My teammates with the Giants, and I feel blessed. I got to play with Dungy and Coach Coughlin, some of the best coaches to ever uh, touch the sidelines. Right, Hall of Fame coaches, and beyond blessed for that opportunity. Learned so much ball, mentorship, leadership by those guys, how they carry themselves. So. Yeah, man. I ever since I got out, I was just looking to scout. I didn't want to coach. I never really had that bug like my dad. Just wanted to scout. I love um, the process of building. Right, I was that kid had this notebook about like this when I was a kid, and I used to write down the draft. I mean, every pick, every single one. Everybody had their page. I used to write everything down, and I would try to project who was going to be good. You know, circling guys that I liked. You know, just all into it. So yeah, and I was so blessed to get an opportunity at the Senior Bowl with Jim down there in Mobile. Since after finishing up my career at Alabama State wasn't too far, Montgomery to Mobile, so definitely had a connection there with the state, and actually obviously playing in the game. So uh, that's how I kind of really got connected into it. Finally, you just got to keep biting that apple, man. Keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. Hitting up people. This is going on. Then I got married, and then life happens, but still trying to get in. And like I said, it was definitely grateful for that opportunity to be the DFO there. And wow, man, just things that took off from there. But it was a great learning experience there. Like I said, I'm so blessed to have had that experience.
Mm-hmm. So tell us how you got to Carolina, Michael.
So, Carolina was oddly enough, man, it was kind of out of the blue, really. I think they had some late changes, and they needed to fill that position, and uh, I was fortunate to be one of the guys that interviewed for that, and had another interview also, kind of going along with that one, and Carolina, I interviewed, and they pulled the trigger pretty quick. I was going to have a second interview, and they said, "Hey, if you do well, we'll bring you up." I did the first one, and I felt that was good enough. So I got offered that job doing the Northeast there for them, and like I said, that was awesome, man. I was like a kid in the candy store starting that. Like I said, I loved it. So there's so much information out there, especially as a scout. Man, the job is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The job is a lot, and not really having a summer, taking that job later in the summer, it's a lot. So you're not having a summer. It's big. Summer is of the utmost paramount, and then going into the second year, right? You kind of know where the guys are a little bit. I'm saying everybody, but you got a pretty good idea.
Start to
You
get
come
for it
through
that
the area.
year. Yep.
Yeah. And you've been there 2-3 visits. And so you kind of get a little familiar. You say, oh, hey, this is a guy. You always write down, or so I usually write down the guy's name and what school, number, and then highlight it. If I'm watching this, like, that was a sophomore. Oh, that's pretty good. So those kind of things that you really kind of get accustomed to going into your second season. But definitely not having a summer is it's not great. So
That's true whether you're in scouting or whether you're not in scouting, Michael. So one of the
Yeah.
questions that we always ask, I've had pivotal people in my career. Roger's had pivotal people in his career. Who was the champion, the person who really was probably responsible for getting you into? Who's the person who's most responsible for getting you into scouting, man? Who really kind of gave you that hand up and into the league in a way that maybe nobody else could have?
Um, besides my dad was very instrumental, just reaching out to people that he knew. Obviously, you
Okay,
got to know somebody.
sure.
There's been the good thing about Scout, and I would say, I guess the good Scouts, they've been around along for a while, right? So some of the guys like, hey, I scouted you. They kind of knew my
Mhm.
story. Some interviewed me. So having a familiarity with some of the Scouts and building that rapport then as a college kid, I often tell college kids, hey, just don't be an a-hole. You just never know, right? Some of these guys remember me from interviewing me
It's
and
like really simple
combine.
advice.
Also, Tomlin always reminded me when you played the Steelers, he was like, "Hey, how's your dad doing?" He'll talk to me, remember me from the combine and things like that. So, it those kind of stories you get to build, right? Football is like any other sport; it's amazing. So, my dad was very instrumental. Some of the people that he knew, obviously Terry Bradway, him and my dad go. Terry Bradway was actually my dad's GA back when he was coaching in
Is that
college.
right? Wow.
that's,
All right.
that's right, right. So that goes way back, and I would say Sam Somerville definitely
Okay.
has lent his hand with me. Just great guy. I think a selfless person, but also gave me the education of the scouting game. I can't say everything, right? You still evolve, but he's always been the guy that I could bounce things off of,
Mhm.
get a better understanding, right? Because as a scout, you don't know everything, you don't see everything.
Mhm.
And so the more people, I would say competent people, right? You make sure you want to have good people speaking positive in your life, and then good people that can bring you in the right direction. Hey, you may want to take a second look at that, or how you prepare. I think Sam has been instrumental with that for me, even with the OneNote, how you can forecast your schedule. Just there's so many ways that you can do things, and it was great just even hopping on a Zoom, him showing me some of the things that he does. So being able to take pictures of your I forgot what they give you at the school, right? Of the list of guys, you can take a picture, put it in your OneNote. You can start making. So there's so many things that you can do, and I would definitely say he's been a person that's it's been right there for me.
Sam is one of the
Yeah.
best guys in the game. I mean, from a
Yeah,
standpoint of just character and personality and all those kind of things. And yeah, throughout football, he's one of the best guys that I know across the board. Just a real
Yeah.
class act and always has been. Let's talk a little bit about that. We'll get more into your scouting career, but let's talk a little bit about the nature of scouting the Northeast, Michael. It's a
yeah.
different animal. On one hand, not as much talent up there. On the other
Mhm.
hand, dense number of schools. I mean, just looking at Boston alone, I mean, there's thousands of schools, seems like around there.
Yeah.
You're in an area that is not remote at all. I mean, you can drive an hour and pass probably a dozen schools, whereas if you were trying to do the Southwest, you maybe drive an hour and you're not even close to any schools. How did that work, and what were your challenges there that you really faced trying to canvass that area of the country?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. The Northeast is not like any other because of the dense population of schools, and because of that, things happen so quickly and so fast. Right, somebody gets hurt, injured, whoop whoop, and then a guy pops here. So because you're there, you feel like you are on the hook, but you want to like, oh shoot, guy popped. I remember was it 2 years ago? The Albany kids popped. They had double digit sacks. It was like 12 and 11 at about week 9. I hadn't went there yet. I wasn't slated to go there, but I remember I think I was coming from Pittsburgh or Buffalo. I was going somewhere, and I ended up going a day out of the way, about 4 hours going to Albany. Had to see him and come back and come back and jump into your loop. But those are just kind of little obstacles that you get in the Northeast, and
Mhm.
weather always can play a part. The scheduling, especially when September hits, certain schools they may not be open. Right, Tuesday,
Mhm.
Wednesday, boom. Um, but what I did, and which I like, I that first part of my schedule, August, and dang near pretty much the whole month of August and beginning of September. I mean, you're just crushing it. You're trying to get as much as background. You got to get that background in because the tape has in it. So if you can really start to make those connections, right? Not just with the liaison, with other people in the school. If you have connections, if you're in any fraternities or any kind of sort of those things, you may want to reach out to those people that are on those local campuses. You never know. There's different resources which you get information. So I always found that to be helpful for me. And the basically kind of what you asked, like the pre-planning, you kind of want to get that stuff done before you get there. But if it's your first year, obviously you have to make those type of connections.
Yeah. Yeah, that first year to second year, again, it's the first. Again, I went from pro scouting to Midwest Scout, and that first year, again, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? It's like, all right, I'm gonna figure it out as I go. I'm gonna listen to all the vets on the road. Again, a guy that was with Carolina that every time I could be with Joel Patton, I was gonna learn something because he had been in the Midwest. He knew the right path. He knew all those things. So you go through that first year, and it's like, all right, I'm just trying to survive. Well, by the second year, fantastic. You know, you're starting to get it figured out a little bit. For me, my second year was COVID. Again, throw a wrench in there, right? But again, for that area scout, for the road scout, again, you figure out all those little intricacies and the way you're going to operate. And again, like you said, you figure out how to, you know, throw an Albany in there. Again, it was a Western Illinois or, you know, whatever, you know, Valparaiso, somewhere that, again, I just got to pop over there. Hopefully you're close by and you can hit those. And I want to step back too with all these. You're taking the path from both a former player to a scout, which again gives you a different perspective, but also the Senior Bowl to an area scout. Both of those, we have seen an uptick in the number of players, former players, and people that have taken that path. What did either of those roles, again, being a former player or being with the Senior Bowl, do to help prepare you for, again, immediately getting out on the road and going and seeing some of those schools?
I would say, well, I'll start with the former player. I think the longer I was in it, the more I got to develop your eye, right? When you first get in, you're kind of figuring out the game. And I think Coach Dungy was probably by far one of the coaches that made the game like a building block, right? He really started from the ground from the game, right? 21 personnel, what that is. You run cover two to everything. You learn that, right? You know how to fit up everything. They come in empty. You learn that. Go to cover one, right? Learn all that. So those are the kind of things that was the building block for me. And a lot of these guys, now that you understand, they don't get that kind of teaching of schematic, right? I got to know what Y shallow X dig, Y cross X, those kind of terminologies, because that's how they taught the game. You just don't learn to play, you learn the game. What are we playing for? Where's our weakness? What we're giving up? So as a scout, I moved that over. As a scout, those are the kind of things that you learn, right? Because you're kind of taught as a player, you kind of know what they're taught. So you're looking, I think for me, I'm looking for certain things, right? So um, that helps. I think also helps being a player that you know what it looks like, right? You've seen it look a myriad of ways. And so when people are like, oh, you think this guy can play? It is like, yeah, because I've seen somebody with similar size, similar body. It looks wonky, but I'm telling you that plays. I've seen it play. So obviously you have to decipher that, right? It's not all just because he looks like this guy, but because you've seen maybe a short, stocky guard or a short corner or all these different. It comes in all shapes and sizes. I think that does help. I think understanding the body function and movement helps as an athlete. If you're not familiar with that, some things you don't know the impetus of movement, right? And change direction. If a guy's tight or not, they see it stiff but certain things. Always look at an impetus of movement, because that's going to tell you if a guy's really stiff. Any guy I tell linear explosion, he's going to be, if you run under 4.5, man, you're going to be a little tight just because you're that fast. Anybody that kind of fast is going to have some tightness. So just using that as an example of just kind of the everyday thing as a player, you may get you get those things, right? If you didn't, you may not understand those kind of, because you're not doing it every day. You feel when it looks different, or you see different body types move. So that helps a ton. And with the Senior Bowl, I would say, wow, the organization. I mean, you have to be super, super organized. I was the DFO there, so pretty much everything. It was a lot of lists. Also, I was a scouting coordinator. You're sitting out. We got the 12 pro guys, so it was great to learn from them. Andy Dangler was awesome. Got a chance to kind of stay tight with him and pick his brain. He's always down to talk ball. Andy knows a lot, a lot. Chris Watts got a chance to learn. I don't want to miss anybody because there's a lot of guys, but those guys really kind of poured into me. Everybody else that was there, no disrespect. I I love all you guys are awesome with me. uh, but like I said, those
You'll be
guys.
getting texts from all of them. Don't
Hey,
worry.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, you got to
Yeah,
talk
no, right.
to man.
Yeah. But just like you guys were saying earlier, just those experiences, right? You get firsthand experiences from guys that's done it, and it kind of most of the guys are good guys, and they'll tell you, hey man, you may want to do this. Hey, bring this. What area you got? Hey, pack extra for this. Some of the guys will tell you some war stories. So those are always good to hear. Guys getting brushed off the road by floods, all types of crazy stuff that you got experiences. Um, but to the point, it's the organization. As a scout, you have to be super, super organized,
Hmm.
overly organized. I color code everything, so I know I'm on point. Like I got color pins here, I got purple one, I got a yellow one. I have to have these different games that represents. I'm red, green, and blue when I talk to academics, weight room. So those kind of things that you develop, whatever suits you, however you can do it. I do a little writing and typing, but that Senior Bowl really prepared that because it's the volume, right? And I think um, that was the best, I would say, precursor, but nothing can prepare you from the road volume though,
Yeah.
because it's the turnaround, right?
Yeah.
I wrote reports.
Three
I got
months.
them in at the end of the week, but I wasn't driving 4 hours in between. I wasn't getting somewhere at 9 o'clock at night and then having to stay up till 1 to make sure I get those. Our reports were due that Sunday. So whatever I did through Friday was due that Sunday. So you can be organized as you want to, but that sleep is undefeated, man. So you, you got to figure that out too.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's again all goes back. If you're not organized,
Yeah,
again, your schedule is going to suffer, and when your schedule suffers, again,
your work.
sleep suffers, your report writing suffers, everything. So again, that organization piece is a perfect one. Again, if and at imagine again, as much as Jim does, is the way he's developed that game to the level it is now. I can imagine wearing what sounds like the multiple hats you were wearing. That organization was a huge piece of it.
Oh, absolutely. I think Matt obviously is in with the Vikings now. Anybody kind of wears that DFO hat. I think you get a good glimpse of what it's going to be being a scouting coordinator. You handle travel, you're doing all these things, but on the road, you are juggling all these things, right? So output wise, as far as the road, it's nothing compare you for that specific thing. But with how Jim had it set up, doing across the country, you get conferences at DFO. I'm going across all the country, right? Going all these guys, and then I'm actually going to games. So on weekends, I'm going driving to LSU, driving here, driving there, talking, meeting. So you're getting a chance to make a visit, make connections. Obviously, it would help me too when I got to Carolina. A lot of these guys had already did for Jim, right? I was a little bit familiar with some of them, so it wasn't like, oh my god, I don't know any. And that work started early. So with Jim, as soon as the game was over, you got about a month or so off in March. We're cranking back up for the next year, right? So
Hmm.
for myself, even when I went to Carolina late, I really had done all the work already. I basically did my summer work to an extent. I just didn't have the character, and obviously grading scale, those things are different. But yeah, like you said, the organization, super key, super key.
Now, Michael, we have a lot of aspiring scouts who listen to this. Some of those guys are going to be plopped in the Northeast because that's typically where you go when you're first sent out on the road. What challenges did you face having to work the Northeast, given the fact that it's not the Southeast? They don't have quite the commitment to football, maybe that you'd find in some of the other areas. You may not have the same resources. You may not have the field houses, or you may not have a room to watch film because you're a scout. What kind of maybe the attitude towards you is not even as welcoming because again, football
Mm-hmm.
is important, but it's not that important. What kind of obstacles like that did you face in that area? That was kind of the nature of the beast geographically.
Yeah, man. Because sometimes people don't want to answer the phone. You got to get. It goes back to that early work. The more that you can get done in the summer, make those connections. The more you can reach out. If you knew a guy that played there, some sort of familiarity to get yourself in the building, right? You got to know the gatekeepers. And so it's going to hurt your first year, right? Because you're not going to, they might have heard about you. They don't know you like that, especially in the Northeast. It is definitely a older area as far as the schools and the coaches, and a lot of those guys don't leave, right? So they've been there, and the Stony Brooks, and my guy I forgot coach at the Penn. Funny guy, I love that dude. He's hilarious. Those kind of guys have been there forever. So you wanna make those connections as best you can. Even looking at their schedules early, going in there early. I That's what I would try to do. And on my second visits, right? So some of my big schools, so say at BC or Penn State, on my second visit, I would kind of schedule 2 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of those schools is hard to talk, right? But if you're in their building 2 days, I would try to go all offense, right? And I'd be try to thorough. But what I really was doing, hoping a coach would come in and I'd be able to talk to them. They see your face around the building. So I tell some of the guys that came, hey, this worked for me. I like it. So if you can kind of schedule, hey, on your second visit and beginning of October, go to second and the third or whatever you may be, and get as much information as you can to get to know you. Then you come back, know the gatekeeper, bring some coffee. Don't come back empty handed. Be a good guy. Try to know what time they get there. So just those little things, and then you have to be ready to midstream adjust. It's bad weather. It is what it is. Ice, rain. I mean, it gets cold. I remember I was in Rhode Island. I think it was in September, early. It was 40 and rainy. I didn't even have my cold gear yet. So if you're in the Northeast, always have your own cold gear because it can get cold at any point. I learned that lesson too. Raincoat. I travel with all that in my trunk.
Yep.
I got a whole apartment back there. But those are, like you said, Neil, those are some of the issues that you're going to run in, especially your first year. Like I said, those OG coaches, old school, they don't know you like that, so they have to build rapport with you. So you want to make sure that you do that. Make sure you want to check the weather and always be ready to adjust because nothing's fun, right? They may get there. This happened to me. I think it was West Virginia. On the way, I think it was the day before. Was I driving? I think I was driving. Then I found out I'm on the website here. They closed practice, closed it. So it's closed to the scouts. What are you gonna do? So I drove from Pittsburgh. That's right. I left Pittsburgh instead of going to Morgantown. I had to drive to Huntington. So it's 5 hours.
Oh wow,
Mm-hmm.
Marshall.
That's a
What you gonna
gorgeous
do?
drive through there too.
Oh
Just praying
man.
you don't break
Oh,
down.
oh man. It's just it's nowhere to go, nowhere to eat. But I mean, what are you gonna do? Because it happens. So
Yep.
as a scout, you just have to always check that, always be on top of that. I mean, hey, I was with I think the Ravens. I forgot his name right now. We were there, Vega. He didn't know. He didn't believe me.
Bobby,
I
yep.
was like, yo, yeah, Bobby. I was like, yo. I said, he was like, where are you going next? And most guys, when you know you're in a loop, you're going somewhere close. Usually Pittsburgh, you're tying to West Virginia, or you're going to Buffalo next. Usually, and I was like, yeah, I was going to West Virginia. They closed the practice. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, you didn't see the. I was like, so we left Pittsburgh, but just having that relationship, being able to talk to somebody, and we kind of followed each other down there together, but that throws a wrench in your schedule. So now I got to figure out when can I go back to Morgantown. Since that's
Mm-hmm.
a big school for me, I got to get back to West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I go to Marshall, then you got to kind of refigure that in your loop when I get there, and I start typing because I usually try to get my reports done that day. It's fresh. So, but at 5 hours, don't matter, man. Got there at 8 o'clock. I gotta get these pit guys in. So I think that was the year they had Cansey and all those guys. So
That was a full day of riding after a long drive.
right.
At
It's
least
better
you got
being there.
a destination city like Huntington.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Again, I loved
Hey,
Marshall. Again, some
Marshall
really good
Brad here.
people.
Y'all watch your mouths, guys.
It's a great place. It was a great visit. Coach Gale. Again, now they got obviously new staff since I was there, but again, it used to be a great visit. But
Yeah.
getting there again, just that's always one of the funky things is the Morgantowns, the Huntingtons. It used to be some of the northern Michigan schools. Minnesota used to be a nightmare, and Minneapolis, St. Paul for Midwest scouts because again it was like a 4-hour drive. Like, what are you doing in between there? It's that
Yep.
4-hour grind of a drive, knowing you're going to have to then sit down for another 3 hours at your computer. It's like, man, hey Elon, go ahead and get these self-driving cars ready for me because I'm ready to hop in that and make the life of the scout that much easier, right?
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? I can
Yeah,
just knock
good
that
point.
out. I know what I invested in. I didn't realize how much I like the salt and pepper sunflower seeds for those drives
Yeah.
like
Oh,
that.
100%.
$5. I'm
Black
just
pepper, cracked pepper.
oh
There you
yeah,
go.
crushing
There
it,
you go. There you
crushing
go. Well,
it.
Michael, again, we kind of talked about it at the beginning
Yeah.
that, again, with new GMs come change.
Mhm.
And so let's get into your Panthers time. New GMs, again, they're going to come in. Sometimes they're just going to make a bunch of changes. Sometimes, all right, we're going to be patient. Let's wait a year. Let's see how everything's going, and then they'll maybe evaluate after the next year. Unfortunately, you were on the first part of that, where
Mhm.
again, new GM comes. But with the Panthers, you had also been a part of with some turbulent times since the new owner has been there. So let's talk about kind of everything you experienced in Carolina, both from a new owner, a new GM, changes. We'll get to Bryce Young because we have to talk about again. Scouting's the one thing, but navigating what you went through as a team and leadership. Talk about that and kind of what allowed you to kind of stay focused and keep doing your work.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. There. I think when you're on the road, it's just so hard to even focus. I mean, my first year, honestly, I had North Carolina too. So, I mean, I barely came up for water. So, a lot of the things were going on, and this is one thing I do tell, and it's what I do try to do. My routine was every Tuesday, but to watch our game, right, the NFL, your team game, it does help you be a better scout, in my opinion. I think
Yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
kind of see what's playing. But anyway, to your question, some of those things that were going on, and you kind of find out more when you get off the road. So he was like, "Oh, really?" I didn't get to meet everybody, and obviously I got to connect with Joe before. Former Joe's awesome, like you said. Joe's awesome, knows everybody, and definitely has probably the best storyteller I've ever met. He has a gang of stories about everything. This dude is really a renaissance man. So. I hope you guys get to have him on here. I would love to just tune in and listen to it. He's a comedian.
Oh, it'll be an entertaining episode for
Oh,
sure.
it'd be great. It's great. Joel's an awesome guy. Um, but yeah, it was a lot, because you're trying to just learn the flow, right? How they want you to present. How does that go? Like, how do they, my first thing was trying to think, okay, how they want us to write the reports. Because with Jim, it was a little different. Some of the things that he want. Jim doesn't like wordy things. He likes more summaries because he's not finna read. It's just like 400. You know how it is. It's 400 some guys. Our board starts at Senior Bowl about 700-800. So you're going through a lot. So just understanding what that person wants, or we just got a new director, so he wants it a little bit like this, or you're trying to figure that out. So that that in itself is another kind of mental weight you have to juggle. And then once you're getting off the road, you're just kind of figuring out the process, how they want to set the board, uh, what do they believe is paramount, right? What is the is it character, right? What is the tipping scale? So all these things were coming, and because you meet Scott's laid back, he just likes to talk ball. He just wants to hear ball talk. Everybody is different, so you're learning personalities and learning, uh, like I said, what is expected, what changes are coming up, and then just on the actual inside scouting part, obviously we traded for the number one pick. So, you're like, okay, that's what we're doing. And hey, so that was excited. I was actually excited for that because you get a chance to, like I said in the onset, like build. Right? You kind of get the reset, but I'm a nerd in a way, man. I love to identify the origin of things, right? How do you start this from the ground up? So it was good for me to just at least be a part of knowing uh, what goes into it, right? Knowing on the pro side, hey, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. I thought the interesting to me, even the trades, right? I didn't understand all the idiosyncrasies of the trade, right? The value and the number. I knew some of that, but just watching that go down. So I think all those things, having those having that information in your tool belt just helps you prepare as a scout. You're more ready to talk about your players. When you hear people say, "Hey, scouts say you can get a conviction," you kind of understand what they mean. I think as you go along in the process, okay, hey, I want to be convicted on this guy. Now all of a sudden you have to like him, but you need to be objectively be able to talk about this guy and how he helps your team. So um, that that's interesting because when change happens, some people want to eradicate that and they want to do it how they want to do it. They want to bring in the people they're familiar with. And a lot of times the GM is not always the sole decider of who comes in and comes out, right? Maybe the assistant GM or director, personnel director, things of that sort has kind of that autonomy. So it just depends on the situation and how they have it structured. Um, I didn't get the chance to talk to Scott when he kind of left. I just voicemail. You kind of learn the politics of the game too. As a player, you get it, and I think that helped. You don't take. I think as a player, you're used to getting criticized. You try not to take it personal, and you
Yeah.
you you do understand that although you're passionate about your work, there's always other things in the factor. And just like as a scout, when you're building a roster, hey, your value as a roster, or sometimes, hey, we just want to do this, or hey, I got my guys, and that's
Yep.
just what it is. And
It's
so
like a hard
you
one
can.
to hear, isn't it? Nothing you
It's
could have done. It's just my guy. It's like, oh,
it's
wow. Which, especially as a former player, it's always, hey, what could I have done better? Oh, your footwork. Yeah, you could have made this. But it's like, yeah, there's nothing you could have done. I just my guy. It's like, man, that one's a tough one to swallow, isn't it?
it's edge nature of the biz. I think some of the
Yep.
OGs when I got in, they it's two players and one's a get cut and one's getting cut.
Yep.
Just you get that. So once you get to that part of understanding, hey, regardless of it, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't have any control over what happens. I
Mhm.
really just have to focus on my work. Um, it sounds cliche, but that's it.
Yep.
It's a mental
100%.
grind, and
Yep.
the road is a mental grind in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Michael, you worked for a guy in Jim who's off the Seattle tree, and then you went to a team in
Mhm.
Scott who's off the Seattle tree. Did that ease the transition at all?
I think there's some familiarity there, especially with Scott Nan to Jim. So I think they definitely trusted what Jim had to say about my work ethic and things like of that sort. And then Jim, obviously, like Jim's been a lot of places, man, and it's been around a lot of great. I would say evaluators in Kansas City, Washington, Green Bay, obviously in Seattle, winning. So guys that have had success winning and doing things a successful manner, you definitely want to pay attention to that, man. You don't luck up in this league, and people think that, but that you don't luck up in this league, right? So the people that have done it and have been successful doing it, you want to pick that knowledge as much as you can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Michael, you brought up that trade for the number one overall pick, who to this point hasn't panned out. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who out there on Twitter or the media world out there saying, "Oh, we knew this was going to happen." No, he's going number one or number two. Like
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
again, every team across the NFL, again, he was number one or number two,
Yeah.
and really he was number one.
Yeah.
And it's easy to go back. Again, the things you bring up, he's small. He had 3-4 NFL weapons at wide receiver. He had the NFL again, all these things. No, but again, it's hard for anybody to say they saw this coming. Have you seen the signs with Bryce? Were there concerns as you were talking through? And I'd imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, it probably had to have been CJ or Bryce. And at
Mm-hmm.
least for a conversation piece, even if you knew it was going to be Bryce, you're gonna play the game, devil's advocate, CJ or Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen with Bryce? What haven't you seen with Bryce? What has gone through your mind as you're seeing again a number one overall pick that ever had an unbelievable college career just not pan out yet in
Mm-hmm.
the NFL?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. Honestly, it's a twofold. As I always think, it's a learning experience, right? You can never learn not get enough information. So, um, yeah, some of the things that I saw, right, and like to your point, his junior year he did, but his senior year he didn't. He didn't have the NFL receivers. So I think that was something good for me to see from his junior year having all those guys. Until that last year he was there, he didn't. He kind of made a lot of plays. I think you always worried about, I would say always, but I mean, he's an outlier. And I think now just seeing it through, all the way. I know with an outlier, you got to have traits around him, and doesn't mean he's a bad player. Um, I can say with more conviction about. I understand why more people go to the SEC to get guys. It's a traits league.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the traits are. I mean, that's where you're going to find them. So, and it's nothing against per se with Bryce, but if you're going to go that route, you have to massively traits. It's like having Chris Paul, right? He can't play with another 5'10" guard. It's not good for your team. Like it's just can't happen. So I think that's something that you definitely have to take into consideration when you're going to if you're going against the traits or you're going to play with the traits, even if you think the traits aren't as good as like you said, Bryce might have been higher. I think like you alluded to, most teams had Bryce at number one. I think that's pretty fair through most teams. I would say majority that was the rumor. Kind of that's where they felt the kid is next level cerebral, all the great stuff you want to hear. So I think that has a lot to do with it. So in your offense, right now you're probably gonna have to operate out of the gun because you have that a shorter quarterback. You're probably gonna have to get bigger guards now because of pressure up front, and there's a lot of things that go into that. So I think Carolina is trying to do that now. I think the strategy seems to try to get better up front. I mean, he got sacked 100. I think he got 117. He got hit 65 or 68 sacks somewhere in there. And with a guy with that kind of side of build, they're just gonna those hits hurt, man. And I even have to. I did more of the hitting than getting hit, and it still takes a toll. So I couldn't imagine 117 of them. Man. That's a lot.
Do you think
So
that has a residual impact?
oh, absolutely. 100%, 150%. I think being a defensive player, we even talked about when I was playing. Like, hey, I remember playing Carolina when Cam was there, and they were doing the read. When we had calls that would just go right at the quarterback. We didn't even care if he gave the ball. We're just coming in and we're
Really?
just going to hit him. We're going to hit him. And so the corners come up being aggressive, go straight to the running back. Don't even worry about the option. Go, go, go. So those having that, right? And after a while, they stopped doing it because we were just teeing off on them. So that is going to have residual effect. And that was just an example in one game, right? So you got a guy that's barely 200 pounds, of course, that's going to have some issues. So all that takes into account in what offense you run and what do you like. I think what I would say that people that really stuck out to Bryce was the fact that he can make plays outside the pocket. I think that was if I had to uh, just gather from all the information was given, the fact that hey, he can play on time, but just as well he can play on time, he can escape and create. And in this game now, because of all the exotic blitzes and the speed, you got to be able to create on the move. And I think conversely, that was a knock on CJ, right? Can he really create? And then he showed it in that Georgia game where he just played lights out. So I think it's kind of wherever you're comfortable with that after that. But we'll see. CJ's playing great. I don't know if anybody's I don't know. Had people were surprised. I mean, CJ's so talented.
Yeah.
Those kids are both were talented kids. So
Yeah, it's that comparison. Again, it's always
it's always going to be there.
they're always going to be tied. Again, it's Ryan Leaf, Peyton Manning, and again, I am absolutely not ready to. The story is not written on Bryce yet, but
No.
again, the fact that CJ has performed the way he has
Right.
and elevated that team, obviously, it's a good team. And again, if you want to go back to that team element, again, football, the ultimate team game, where again, CJ's got a Pro Bowl left tackle, one of the better consistent left tackles for a long time. He's got some good interior pieces. Now they've really loaded it up on both sides, defensive head coach. Where again, you flip it back to the Panthers. Again, you were a 1 year head coach, and you're changing everything again. They get the same thing front office wise. Team philosophy changes. Not only again going back for you, not only are you learning a new scouting manual, then it's another new scouting manual. It's another new way of operating with the pressure. Oh, by the way, that guy you pass is tearing up the league. So again, it's one of those things that is hard to block out, but is always going to be present there. And again, it doesn't make it any easier for Bryce. Again, going back to that character on Bryce. Again, his character reads as he's going to be fine. He's going to make it through this. Hopefully, those residual blows that he's taken, not only on the field, but in the media, everything you hear, hopefully that's not going to be fatal for him. I don't believe it is.
No, I don't. I think I think most people, when you talk to Bryce, you feel highly of him, right? And I think with that guy, and it's okay, and not saying that obviously they're too different, but even Drew Brees with that smaller stature took a little minute, right? He went to New Orleans and had an offense that was playing against him, right? The high lows, because he was a smaller guy, we played them different. But where Sean Payton, I thought, was great, everything was rhythmic, right? He had big receivers in the slot where Marquise Colston was there, right? So they high low you. You get Colston in the middle slot, you get what's my man, Lance Moore in the tight slot, and he would do a lot of creative things. So it was a high low, easy read for Drew, right? He's not back there as soon as his back foot, ball's coming out. So some of those things that you got to do with a smaller guy, but you get a Colston, you get those weapons to give him that catch radius. So I don't think, like you said, I don't think the book is all the way closed on Bryce. I think he's just going to have to be in somewhere that's probably has a little bit more toolsy for him. He's just a guy that's going to need that. I think even you see that with Kyler Murray in Arizona, talented guy, but they realize like we got to get traits there, and they brought in all those older receivers, but to give them something, right? And those guys can't sit back there with. You can't have guys on 6'1" or under, right? They got to be like 6'2" or taller. That's just what you figure out.
Now, we see a player in Washington now who's having a lot of success, Jane Daniels, longer than Bryce, but very similar frame wise. Already having problems with his ribs. We're not even halfway the mark of the season. Do you think he's potentially on that path if he's not protected in Washington in a certain way where he doesn't take that kind of pounding?
Oh, absolutely. You got to mitigate the hits from your quarterback. That's your franchise, and especially drafting somebody like you said, Roger, 1 or 2. Hey, man, hey, we got to do whatever we can. We got to go all. When you go 1 or 2 quarterback, you got to kind of go all in to protect the guy. And I think that is a concern, like you said. Even I didn't per se watch Jaden to that extent, but just to seeing him play, obviously the touch, a lot of things you just said about Bryce, just maybe above average arm strength, but just the processing, the accuracy, the anticipatory skills, all those things. But the frail build, when the guy starts running and those hits hurt, right? It might not have been the worst hit. He could have got hit 2 weeks ago, and I think that's something that you learn in this league too. You get hit bad, and then a week later or 2 weeks later, you kind of get hit in that same spot, and it feels different, right? So, Jaden, that's just something you got to be cognizant of. You roll away from pressure, you bring in more. I mean, I don't know what you do. They have more shorter receivers there, so they get some. I don't know. Bring in the tight end. It's a lot of things you can protect him, but yeah, you definitely don't want to slide a build, and who knows how long he's going to be out. I'm not sure, but
yeah. Well, it's going to be again. You think about all these factors. Again, Jaden Daniels having success again. It makes people again every conversation goes, well, why isn't Bryce? And again, hopefully, Coach Canales in there again, continuing to develop, build around Bryce again. Is a franchise change what Bryce is ultimately going to need, or do you think he can make it in Carolina and reset the narrative?
um, I don't know. I guess I'm a believer in the guy. And I wouldn't want to take anything off of Bryce. I mean, that guy is mentally sharp. I think his dad is like a psychologist or something to that effect. So this kid, he gets it. He understands, right? So I think sometimes though, I think it's going to depend on what they want to do in Carolina. If you're really gonna build around this guy, I think you'll see it in the draft and free agency. If you start seeing bigger receivers and bigger tight ends, I think, hey, maybe getting some explosion out of the backfield for some more speed out there. I think maybe they can do that anyway, but I think maybe just with the constant change, right? We had 3 head coaches when I was just there, Wilkes and special team. Yeah, so it's 2 GM. It's a lot for that kid. You had 2 GMs, 2 different offenses within. I don't even say really 2 years, maybe 14 months. You had to learn something totally new, schematic wise, and you go from a 4-3 to 3-4 defensively. So there's a lot that kind of that was in that melting pot of success for Bryce, and you know, um, with those kind of guys, sometimes it is best for them to have just a fresh start.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that looks, right? A team picking up Bryce, I'm assumingly would be either to compete or as a backup. And then how willing is a team going to invest in a free agent quarterback that's an outlier? And I think there are people that believe in him, but you're going to have to surround him with those traits, right? I mean, that's just what you're going to do. Is a team already ready for that? So I think, you guys may know a little bit better than me, man. You've been around that and probably seen it different ways, how teams do it. But I mean, I guess the Chargers did it with Breeze, right? Trade him to New Orleans and our free agent, and it works out for them, right? They were able to do that, and they draft Phillip Rivers, right? And where's his history for both of those guys? So
Now
I don't know
speaking,
where you guys land on that.
well, I was going to ask you a question, Michael. Speaking to that, I think didn't Bryce get 19 games, and then whether it was Canales' decision or maybe Tepper's decision, which is my
Mhm.
guess, he's benched for a guy who, come on, I mean,
Yeah.
where are you going to go with the franchise with Andy Dalton as your starter? Do you think it can still happen for him in Carolina?
I think just obviously I don't talk to Bryce, but I think just of how I was on the outside looking in, how the situation was handled. That I mean, I don't know. I think it just may be time to turn the page. I don't know. I don't know how we seen or you guys seen somebody. How does that look? Like you usually not after a season and 2 games or you get benched and maybe things need to slow down for him. But do you let him slow it down for him and maybe make the playbook like this? I'm not saying that it wasn't. I don't know, but let him play through it. I mean, who's to see? But like you said, at some point now, I think they're 1-6 or 1-7. When you put Bryce back in there, I mean, he's going to need the reps. I know,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you don't want him to get crushed to hit, but I mean, he's got to get the reps. And I think that there's been some flashes, right? There's when he has time, when things been in kind of rhythm, that you've got to see some flashes there. So I think you can be optimistic, but I think you got to see more. I don't know if it's enough sample size for kind of what you said, Roger Neal, or just like the new scheme, new offense, and you draft the Icky. I think he gave up like 12 or 13 sacks last year. And I'm not trying to call him out, but I mean that's a part of it. You draft a guy in the 6th overall. I mean that's part of protecting your outlier quarterback. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it's got to be a lot to consider for everyone. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. But I think
Exactly.
Bryce is at the point where it looks like it's a bit fractured because now you're still riding with Dalton, like you said.
Yeah.
You're still riding with how far are you going to go, and he's a good, great for what he is, a great backup for what he is.
Yeah.
But um,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because again, like you said, you've got a lot of factors there. Again, one when Neil and I joined forces together, one of the first episodes we did was talking about David Tepper and all that was going on in Carolina at that time, and it seems as if he's taken a little step back. Maybe he's kind of realized with this new GM, new head coach, that the owner does need to step back. But again, quarterback, you have to get it right and there's no one way. There's arguably 32 plus ways to build a team, and I would be willing to bet that somebody thinks they can make Bryce Young work for them. And I'd be willing, again, like you said, Bryce Young is a special kid. He's got great character, and that's going to allow him to make it. So, we'll find out. Find out where it all goes, and
like kind of. Sorry, you were just saying. I was Pittsburgh did it right. They traded Kenny Pickett. Hey man, we see it. It ain't it, and they
well,
cut
even
bait.
even beyond that, you bench Justin Fields for
Yeah,
Russell Wilson, and it was again. I said it this week. Mike Tomlin will never get enough credit for what he does. It looked rough in the first half for Russell for a while before he really got it rolling. And I thought again Mike Tomlin, when I think it was Brandon Marshall that popped in on his
yep,
presser and made the joke, and hey, he gets paid well to make decisions like that. And again, for a Mike Tomlin type, again, there's probably a handful of coaches that are going to be able to have the cachet to make that kind of move, and maybe it takes that kind of coach to pull the trigger and bring Bryce in and see if they can get him straightened out. So it's
Him and Bryce
time will
drive
tell.
academic cultures as well. I was there actually in summer with helping the DB, so in the training camp with the Steelers. And Mike's a great dude, man. I probably one of the better leaders I've been around. How you can really cultivate an audience, get them to play, not even just play, not a rah rah, but just set the standard of expectation, execution, how you do things as a business every day. He's very, very, very consistent. And how you see him on TV is how he is with the players, how he is in person. So, I got the chance to respect that and got a great, and I told him, Mike's gonna give you that eye contact now. He's gonna look you dead through your soul. So you want to make sure that you link with him, make sure we vibe in the right way. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I told him I really appreciate that opportunity and just being able to see his leadership, and I had to definitely have grown a greater appreciation for who he is and how he runs stuff.
Never had a losing season in
Ever.
15 years. I don't know how many it is exactly, but that's remarkable to me. In a
Unbelievable.
changing league where the rules are changing all the time and the players are more evolved than ever, it's amazing. Changed coaches and systems and all those kind of things, and he still gets them there. Fascinating.
He has survived a GM change now and a franchise quarterback change,
Absolutely.
and yet this is a Steelers team that again it's his team. You can see that without question. And again, he will not. You can give him all the credit you want, and it's probably still not enough for what the Steelers team is doing. So,
Like you said, the ownership, stability there, and the kind of what you mentioned,
Helps.
Roger, with Bryce and kind of Mr. Tepper, and obviously to your point, from what I've seen, now I'm not there now, but from when Scott was there into the transition with Dan, Dan is now, from my perspective, I don't know, I wasn't there every day, obviously, but he seemed like he did take a bigger step away. Now,
well, time will
Dan
tell
may
now.
or not be able to confirm that because I ain't there, but just from what I saw earlier and with Scott and then to the trends, he's kind of, popped in here and there, but it was not like it was before. So
Yeah,
definitely want to at least
well,
see
time
that.
will tell. Time will tell. Well, Michael,
We'll
this has
see.
been fantastic. Michael's on Twitter @_ cosine. If you're a
Yep.
math guy, you probably are going to spell it wrong. It's COESIGN. So it's @cosine on Twitter. Make sure you go check out Michael. Hit him up. He'll probably hit you back, ask him questions, anything we missed. Make sure you check him out and give him a follow. Give Neil a follow as well @Inside the League. I'm @RightStepADV. The Panthers, they will have a chance this week to make strides towards improvement. Again, whether their season is done or not, they head out to Denver to take on the Broncos. Bo Nix, under Sean Payton, has been a little bit up and down, but the Broncos playing a little bit better ball than I would have expected anyway. That is one of the fun things about the NFL. The margin between winning and losing is razor thin. It is any given Sunday. That's more than just a line in a movie. So don't give up hope for your favorite NFL team yet. And we'll go from movies to books. Our very own Neil Stratton, not only a premier source for all things NFL, but a writer as well. That is writer, Writer. Yes, I know Neil lives in Texas. Not sure if he's ever actually been a rider on the back of a horse or a bull. Yes, but he's got at least one book out. Neil, this is going to be your second book, correct?
This will be third.
Third book. Holy cow.
Yeah.
I apologize. A third-time author.
That's okay.
What kind of preview can you give us for this book?
A lot of people have forgotten that first book too. So you're not alone, Roderick. This is going to be about the 2016 draft, and it was a very interesting one. We're focusing on 8 players: Laramie Tunsil, Derrick Henry, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Jakeem Grant, Tyreek Hill, and I think there's one more, and Dak Prescott, and Michael Thomas. There's your. So most of those players were a little underdrafted. Not all of them. Obviously, we have the first and second picks there, but a lot of great stories. The story is just about Laramie Tunsil and from the scouts that were in the rooms and had no idea what was coming. Make the book, I think, worth a good read. But there's a lot more other stories there as well. And we talked to lots and lots of scouts, and I have not spoken to one Roderick David about his experience in 2016. That's on purpose. I want that to be very fresh whenever the time comes, and we'll probably have that live here in this space whenever the time comes. We get closer, but we're targeting the 25 draft for that to be released. That's if I can manage to pull it all together, finish up the last few things, and then read the thing so it can be on Audible. So, but fingers crossed, hoping that we can get there. It's been a lot of fun, and yeah, I'll take your fingers crossed too, Michael.
Let's
And
go.
hopefully we can hit that deadline. It won't be easy, but looking for it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun reading it, writing it. I mean, I hope it'll be a lot of fun for people reading it as well. And that's coming. It's around the corner.
Yeah. Now that 2016 draft, my first draft with the Falcons, was an unbelievable draft for us. I'm not going to get into it now because I don't want to give you guys anything. We're going to make you wait until this book comes out. His third book from Neil Stratton. Again, start mark your calendar for it. Remind him, send him some text, keep him on point. I know what crossing your fingers does in the NFL. It's going to get you fired. So we don't want that to happen. It's about that grind. It's about getting that work done. No question it's going to come out. But, Keanu Neal, the first round pick of the Falcons, was the first of a number of starters we drafted on the way to a Super Bowl that very next year. So that's a fun one. So, I'm looking forward to that one. You should be too. Something else you need to check out, especially for all you agents, is Agent Live 360, a CRM, a calendar manager, contract storage, Rolodex of your contacts, and more. The all-in-one platform that is always right at your fingertips, a must-have for an agent in this business. Head over to agentlive360.com. Sign up for a demo. Yours truly will walk you through the entire software. And yes, I promise we will talk some ball as well. Sign up now using code TRIAL90 for your first 3 months at just $10 a month. Many of you probably spend more than that in a week on junk food that you definitely don't need. So do something good for your agency. Sign up for Agent Live 360. That is agentlive360.com. College football, a lot like this year's race for the number one quarterback spot. It is wide open. I can assure you we will have plenty more talk on players maybe the second week of November, perhaps, while teams like Ohio State and Texas will both have a chance to bounce back this week. Georgia shows us that Kirby still has them ready for the big stage. Scouts, Michael, we know they're starting to think about finalizing reports, follow up with those late risers. NFL teams starting to consider either going for it this year with the trade deadline approaching or shaping up that roster for future years. No matter what it is, film's going to be watched, character is going to be evaluated, fit's going to be determined for the team, and just like them, we will keep scouting.